into the river, out of the darkness. Oh Lord, have mercy.
So, Dr. Wilson, I know you may not know the full story about this, but I had met, similar as we're doing this now, I'd met Dr. Kwami doing an interview after the Fisk Jubilee Singers won the gospel Best Roots Gospel Grammy. Um, and he was just such an engaging man, and we had such a pleasant conversation. I said, next time we're in Nashville, we'll have to have lunch and get together. And we were talking about maybe doing some education things as well with the Grammy Museum. Um, it had not come to fruition, but we also talked about a project I was doing, the one that we're talking about now, the Gospel According to Mark, and about having the Fisk Jubilee Singers on it. And much to my pleasant surprise, he was agreeable, and it was really one of the great experiences. How did you first come to know about Dr. Kwame, and what were your first impressions of him when you did meet him?
So when I was in the 6th grade, that was like 1999, 2000, Dr. John Hope Franklin, former history professor, but world-known historian, was working at Duke University. And I'm from Durham, North Carolina. And the Jubilee Singers came and did a concert in his honor. And I went to the audience, my mom took me, and I was sitting in the audience, and I had never heard Black people sing like this before. My only experience with Black people singing was like gospel and R&B, and but I'd never heard them sing like this. And I turned over to my mom, I said, I'm gonna be one of them. And she said, okay. And she bought me the book Band of Angels, which is the picture book about the story of the Jubilee Singers. And I did a book report on it.
Hmm.
And that is how this kind of started. And so when it came time to look at schools, my parents told me that I had to go to an HBCU. You can go to any HBCU you want to, but it has to be an HBCU. And I said, that's fine, because I'm going to Fisk. So it wasn't until my sophomore year of high school, I visited Fisk. And if you ask any Fiskite, they will tell you that you don't choose Fisk, Fisk chooses you. And so I visited the campus, and I sat in the chapel and played the piano, and I said, yep, this is it. This is where I want to be. And so when it came time for college decisions, I decided to come to Fisk. And so my freshman year, I was a music major, and I met Dr. Kwame, and he was this very quiet, stoic man, and I was deathly afraid of him. I was so afraid. I said, I don't want to blink in his presence. And that was my first impression of Dr. Kwame. And then, of course, as I, became a Jubilee singer, and I was his assistant for 2 years, being very close to him. He really is he was one of the world's most amazing humans.
Tell me about what you do know about his faith. As I got to know him a little bit more, we didn't talk about those things the first out of the gate. I was doing the interview for the Grammy Museum, but eventually we talked about it. And certainly when we got to the studio to record, I remember talking with him about that. But, well, I know you're a man of faith. How, did you connect with him on that level? And how did that present? How did his faith present itself to you and in your everyday dealings with him?
Dr. Kwame was a spiritual father while I was on campus, keeping me grounded. And when we talk about the history of the Jubilee Singers and the history of the Negro spiritual, we often talk about how, some of the songs were work songs. So they helped them, get through some of the drudges of enslavement at that time. Sometimes the messages were coded, we're going to run away tonight, or we're going to meet tonight, steal away is one of those pieces that alerts either a meeting's going to happen or we're going to attempt to run tonight. Or songs that, talk about, hope of a better life and things like that. But the Negro spiritual, in essence, many of those songs were acts of worship or expressions of worship. And so Dr. Kwame would include expressions of worship in our rehearsals, because I played the piano. And sometimes he would come in and he was like, "Preston, sit down." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he would have me play, and he'd have us sing along, and we would just have moments of worship. And it wasn't always something was wrong, or something might have been wrong. We might have just been heavy as a university, might heavy as something. But we use worship as a way to navigate some of the vicissitudes of life. And I distinctly remember those moments in the music building, coming into his office, and he would have worship music playing in his office. And he had a fresh hallelujah anytime you walked by him. But sometimes he would just sit, and you would just see just a few tears stroll down his face. He wouldn't say a lot. And so for me personally, how did that impact me? Sometimes, even as a man of faith, we compartmentalize worship as like this moment with slow music and ethereal sounds and yada yada yada. And it can be that. But it also can be guidance, everyday direction, foresight for the future. So, Dr. Kwame was preparing me for the future when, he was saying, fix your clothes, don't wear this, iron this. So it was never him being mean, but he had the foresight preparing me for the future. And I think that is part of worship, his guidance. And so if you knew him, you knew that he loved his family, he loved Fisk, he loved the Jubilee Singers and music, but most of all, he loved God.
What do you think is his? I mean, obviously he was there. Was 28 years? Was he 20? Obviously, you have to have a large impact to be there for 28 years. But what do you, if you could narrow it down, what do you think his biggest achievement, or what is that piece of his legacy that he leaves behind that you think carries on through the Fisk Jubilee Singers, forever? I mean, what is that thing that he left behind?
Well, tangibly, getting a Grammy. Like, we were one of the only, or might have been, we were the first HBCU in Tennessee to have a Grammy. I think we might have been one of the first HBCU choirs to have a Grammy. Like, there were just a lot of firsts that Jubilee Singers had. We were the first Black college to do a concert inside the White House. We were one of the first, because usually concerts happen on the steps, but we were inside the White House when we got the National Medal of the Arts. Lots of international tours. One in particular, going to Ghana, his home country. I know that was very, very special to him. But I think the legacy that he leaves is the standard of the Jubilee Singer, the incredibly high standard of the Jubilee Singer, that I am, continuing, as director. And I'm happy that I have the alum, Fisk Jubilee Singer alum, to not only just tell, but to show them what the standard is. And the standard is outside of the musical, like knowing your music and showing up on time, but like being good people in addition to knowing your music and showing up at rehearsal on time. I think that is priceless. That is the legacy that he leaves with me, knowing how to present yourself at all times. Whenever we travel by plane, we have to be in business casual, going and coming. We didn't understand it at the time, but again, going back to the idea of foresight, sometimes we would get off the bus and be, a barrage of press. When we went to Ghana, we were getting off the bus to go to Ghana for a 9-hour flight, and 4 news channels came asking us questions. Now, if we were in pajamas and bonnets and head wraps and do-rags, that was not going to look good. I think, yeah, the standard of just like knowing how to present yourself, knowing your worth, knowing your worth as the ancestors have prepared the way for you. So when we're singing about the Negro, when we're singing the Negro spirituals and sharing our ancestors' story, you do that with pride. You don't do that with disappointment and even with sadness, because some of the stories are very sad. But you do it with pride. You know, you never saw him with his head hanging down, and you never saw any Jubilee singers with their head hanging down. So those are the things that I remember. That kind of standard. That's the legacy that he leaves, and you know when a Jubilee singer was under the baton of Dr. Kwame.
What's it like for you, taking the, as you said, taking over now as the musical director and the first one after him? It's like, the first shortstop to play after Derek Jeter. It's like it's not the easiest thing. What's that like for you? Was there trepidation about doing it, and how has it been, adjusting to it?
Yeah, guys, I didn't want this job. I did not want this job. And it's funny when we see things in hindsight. I did not want this job, and then I was approached about applying for it, and I was obedient in doing that, and here we are. And after the announcement came out that I would be the next director, Rachel, his daughter, called me, and she's like the Jubilee child, because we used to like watch her run around while we were in rehearsal. Now she's like this grown woman. It's like, oh my gosh, what is life? And she texted me and she said, Preston, I don't know if you remember, but the last time you were at Fisk, one of the last times you were at Fisk and I was here, and you were in my dad's office, and you all were talking, and when you left, he said, Rachel, that's going to be the next director of the Jubilee Singers, but don't tell anyone. And I said, why wouldn't you tell me this? This would be important information. And I talked to some of the people who were close to him. And, I was at the top of his list of, people that would succeed him, because he was planning on retiring in the next 2 years. And that story is funny because when he took the position in 1994, he didn't want the job either. When the voice teacher called him and said, would you come and direct the Jubilee Singers? He said no. And he prayed about it, and he believed that God wanted him to be there for that time. And so he was obedient. And as history will repeat itself, I believe that God called me to this position, and I was obedient. And so I am, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and open to what that looks like. But yeah, we really had mirror experiences around this position.
Wow. Who knows? Maybe you'll see your successor at some point before the.
I'm gonna tell him or her. I'm gonna say, you're gonna be after me. I'm gonna prepare.
Right. Start thinking about it now.
God.
Well, hopefully a long time to come, obviously. What is the thing that as you're doing this and you're leading into the next phase, what is it that you want to continue to obviously there's things you'll want to continue that he was doing, and then also what's the thing or the sort of the perspective or the angle or the twist, whatever it is that you want to, what's the next thing that you want to bring to it yourself? Like, what are you taking with you, and what do you want to expand on?
So I thought about this, and and I'll be honest, that I'm still massaging what some of this might look like. We as the Fisk Jubilee Singers will continue to be the authority of educating about the Negro spiritual through performance. So that's never going to change. But I do want to broaden our repertoire. not only in genre, but also in composer. So, you know, we sing a lot of Moses Hogan, we sing a lot of Jester Hairston, we sing a lot of William Dawson, um, we sing some Noah Ryder, but, and we sing some Undine Smith Moore. But I want to include more, you know, sing more of John W. Works music that, you know, wasn't really published. We just have recordings of. I want to sing more, you know, having, you know, Black female composers sing more of their music. I want to sing uh, more of the current composers, the people that are still living and younger, and you know, who are, you know, less than 30, you know, maybe even find some people who are, you know, composing in undergrad, doing some arrangements of other genres, you know, the babies of the Negro spiritual. So maybe singing some vocal jazz, singing some gospel, you know, things like that. I would also like to get the other end and sing some, um, you know, period pieces or some things that were, you know, classical pieces that were popular at the time, because that is the story of the Jubilee Singers. They were singing the popular music at the time, and they were not getting the response or the respect that they wanted. And so they decided to sing their own music. And that is what captured people. Um, you know, talking about authenticity. People want that. And so we're always going to be authentic, but I do want us to broaden the repertoire that we're singing. And then secondly, um, with us winning the Grammy and, you know, navigating this new world with AI and technology. And I'm not one who scoffs at newness or tradition. You know, I'd like to be rooted in tradition, but growing in innovation. So what does that mean for the Jubilee Singers? I am not necessarily concerned about returning to the prominence and the legacy of the Fisk Jubilee Singers of yesteryear. But what can the legacy of the Jubilee Singers look like in 2024 and beyond? What does that look like? How are we, you know, recruiting for the institution, but also for the ensemble? How are we educating through our concerts? How are we, uh, how are we contributing to diminishing society's ills through our performance? You know, and that's where my research base comes in. So those are some of the thoughts that I have around uh, moving forward, but also, you know, being mindful of the traditions that, you know, that brought us to Fisk University and the Fisk Jubilee Singers.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about was the sort of the Fisk Jubilee family, the alumni. Because I thought it was very interesting when we did our session. There were, as I mentioned, there were some alumni that were there as well. And to me, it seemed like, I don't know, maybe I was wrong, but it seemed like everybody knew each other. Or if they didn't know each other, they knew of each other. You know, and they'd heard something. What is that, you know, to be a part of that, obviously, as you've been as an alumni now, the musical director, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, why is that? Why does it seem like there is such this thread that everybody, you know, once sort of like once a Fisk Jubilee singer, always a Fisk Jubilee singer?
That is true. Once a Jubilee singer, always a Jubilee singer. And you knew if you were a student, you know when you're a Jubilee singer under Dr. Paul T. Kwami. Even at his memorial service, um, we all went to Jubilee Hall, and just in the lobby of Jubilee Hall, we were there together, and we um, decided to sing together. And, you know, I was already a mess that day anyway, but there is something, for lack of a better word, something magical that happens when we get together, because many of us had not performed together since our graduation. You know, I graduated in 2010. One of my good friends graduated in 2008. And we hadn't seen each other since she graduated in 2008. And it was 2022. when we had the funeral. And we were singing, we knew all the notes, we knew all the breath markings, we knew all the articulations, we knew all the dynamic markings, because that's what he instilled in us. And so outside of the musical, technical aspect, it was a family, not because, the cliche, like, is a family, but we spent a lot of time together, because we toured so much. And in addition to touring and spending a lot of time together, I think we as composers and directors of choirs, we take for granted how we are demanding vulnerability from our singers and performers every time we get on stage. So we are forced to be vulnerable with one another. You're gonna get close.
Right.
And with that, there would be times we would be on the bus for, 8-9 hours. We hated each other. Like real,
Like a family, yeah.
literally. And it was very much apparent, back on campus, we could hate each other. But you, who are not a Jubilee singer, you couldn't say anything about any of us. And, I think that's something that is in every troop. If you're a Jubilee singer, oh yeah, you're gonna get this. But if somebody from the outside says something, you have the entire force of the alum and the Jubilee Singer Network behind you, right? So all I can say is that it's just something magical when we get together, because we have a love of music, we have a love of the history of this music. We have a love of God, because this is worship that we're doing, telling the stories of our ancestors. And so I think that's just the best way to articulate it. And that is something that I want to make sure that we continue to love on each other, like Dr. Kwame loved on us.
Well, yeah, as I said, thank you for doing this. Really, thank you for carrying the tradition of Dr. Kwame forward. I only knew him for a short while, a couple of years, and only really towards the end got to know him better, a little bit better. I'm terribly sad that I didn't get to know him more, and I didn't meet him earlier. But what an amazing experience it was having him involved, having the singers involved. I wish you'd been there too. I will say that day in the studio with them is probably of the all time. I've done a lot of recordings. That's top 3 moments. There was just something there. Talk about a magic. The moment they all started singing, and working out the parts, and Shannon Sanders was there and helping work out the parts. Just as it started to come together, you thought, oh, here we go. Like, you knew like this is going to be really special. And that certainly is a lot to say about the history and the tradition of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. And it says a lot about Dr. Kwame. So thank you again, Dr. Wilson, for doing this. Wish you tons of success and good fortune and good blessings going forward with your own projects, with your own singing. I know you are a great singer yourself, so I hope that is everything you want it to be. But, especially now with the Fisk Jubilee Singers. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Into the